the talk tonight is related to the question of the week, and I just have like kind of a mini epiphany and some great questions earlier. Actually, Julie asked me some wonderful questions about it in Tai Chi this morning. But the challenge of the week, I'm sure you guys know because you all are just glued to the Instagram feed and you see it every week. The challenge of the question of the week is, do I respect myself and the things and the people in my life? And it kind of begs the question first, what is respect? Do I know what respect is and what's my definition of it? And you should decide what that is. I'm going to give you mine or at least an idea of it tonight. But the dojo in martial arts is very obviously about respect. And if you ever watched a martial arts movie, if you've never practiced martial arts, you get this in some part. Everyone bowing to each other, and there's all this honor and all of this wrapped up in it. And it should be that way. This is part of the book Budo Secrets, which is a great book that we have in the dojo. This is from Gichin Funakoshi's 20 Principles of Karate. And Gichin Funakoshi was the founder of Karate Do. We've got a book by him in the dojo as well. But the number one of the 20 principles is never forget that karate begins and ends with respect. Begins and ends with respect. And literally, every class you come into, the first thing that we do is bow, and the last thing that we do is bow. And there's a reason for this. It's not an accident. It's because it is incredibly important for us to respect each other and to respect the art, respect the time and the energy that we're pouring into it, to take it seriously, to put ourselves in what is unfortunately a very different state of mind from what we're used to being in, right? We're not used to being in this very respectful state where we're showing a lot of care for what we're doing. We're used to being in this state where we don't really care what's going on, and if we try and do things well, great, but whatever. Martial arts is not like that. You can't show up with some kind of a casual attitude toward it because you'll literally get hit in the face if you're not paying attention, right? I mean, even in Tai Chi it might happen. So, respect. And this, the most clear sign of respect in the dojo, as it is in many Eastern cultures, is the bow. And we bow all the time in the dojo. We bow when we walk on and off the mats. Some people bow when they walk into the door, even though you technically don't have to do that. We bow to each other every time we're starting a drill with each other. And lots of bowing. And there's a reason for that. And we should not see all the bows in class and just start taking it for granted. We want to treat every single bow like it is a holy moment, like it is the most important and only thing happening in our entire lives. Because that is what's possible for every bow, is to be pulled fully into the moment and treat every moment with that respect. The bow is an outward manifestation of the respect and the care and the mindfulness that we have for each moment. And I remember there was a student, I believe his name was Dennis, a senior student of mine back in the school in Michigan, at Seafood Brown School, and every time he would bow on the mats, you'd see other people walk in, they'd stand, bow, very respectfully walk on the mats, but you'd see Dennis stand there and bow, and he'd hold it for like 20 seconds, and then come up, and then he'd walk in. And it wasn't like he started the bow and forgot what he was doing and started to take a nap, although I have seen that from time to time when people are bowing in the dojo. He was very, very serious and focused and intentional about his bow. And this is how we should be with all of our bows. When we bow in the dojo, when we're in Seiza, we're literally making ourselves lower. We're humbling ourselves physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. And when we humble ourselves, being humble does not mean the same thing as I think that I'm worse than you, or I'm worse than somebody else. That's not really it. It's humbling means like I'm trying to let go of the ego. And you may have had the experience in class where you're practicing with somebody who's really good, and they will humble you in the way that we normally understand that to be like, I got my butt kicked, I had no idea what I was doing, and then of course we know that we're supposed to really enjoy that, so we say it was great. But in the moment, being humbled, if it's your ego experiencing being humbled, that sucks. Nobody enjoys that. But when you can step outside of the ego and you realize what happened and how amazing it was and how it was an opportunity for you to not be connected to and attached to the ego, then you're like, oh, that was amazing. That was so great. So we have the opportunity to be humbled and to humble ourselves by choice. This is what we should be doing every time that we bow. We are actually attempting to transcend the ego and transcend the small self. When we bow, this is a physical manifestation of that. And in the article that I wrote, the blog that I wrote for the newsletter, which you guys, they didn't get it yet, did they, Catherine? They got it. Great. So some of you guys read all of this stuff already. But when I say, I don't hardly ever say this to anybody, but I was in a class at Sifu Brown's school many years ago, and Reverend Kelly came and taught a yoga class. And it was the first yoga class that I took. And I enjoyed it so much that it was the last yoga class I took for like 20 years. It was so painful for me. So much of my body does not cooperate with yoga. I understand and respect and appreciate it so much that I don't want to disrespect it with my attempts at doing yoga. But in this class, I had a wonderful experience, and the best, most memorable part about it was when Reverend Kelly came out and he bowed to us all like this, and he said, "Namaste." And he said, "You know what this means?" He said, "This means that my soul bows to your soul. The divinity in me bows to the divinity in you." And I thought, whoa, that's for real. If every time we bowed, that was like what we had in mind, I mean, that would totally change the bow for us, and that would change our experience of practice and of life, right? We have a tendency to walk around and be completely attached to and experiencing the world through the ego, but the simple act of a bow can be the big self, that highest self, the divine, the soul, the Buddha nature, the Atma in me is recognizing the same in you. And there is no real separation between any of us. This is what the concept of oneness is. Our ego perceives this separation. Our ego has judgment and comparison and separation. So like I talk about, the ego is like, you know, if you're in class with a bunch of different people and you're identifying as the ego, you're a hot dog right here in a package right next to another hot dog, and you're convinced that you're totally different from this hot dog next to you. But that's just because there's this tiny little separation between you that doesn't actually exist, right? I mean, in the physical universe, sure, there is some way of measuring and saying there's a separation between these two, but if you have the right perspective, you know that everything is one. And if you just step on that package of hot dogs, it all becomes one. We're all made out of the same stuff. So this is kind of like what a bow does. A bow is like I bow down and it's like I'm getting smushed in with everybody and everything else. It is a pure and violent experience of the oneness, because in that moment our separation disappears. Some of you have had this experience in class, maybe when you're practicing with somebody, or maybe I think a really great way to experience this is practicing Tai Chi in a group of people. Even on Zoom, you can kind of feel this, where you're all kind of getting swept up by the energy. There's the music, and you're all kind of going to the same rhythm, but you are all breathing the same breath and moving the same posture, and it's like Tai Chi is moving you, and it's flowing through all of you together. This is just one way of experiencing this idea. So when we practice as a great partner rather than as an opponent, right? An opponent sees the separation between me and you. Practicing as a partner is like, I'm actually just as interested in your growth or your experience as I am in my own, if not more so. And when we're able to step out of ourselves and our own desires and our own small experience of that moment and connect with somebody else, that is it. And this is what we seek in a relationship. This is what we seek in the greatest relationships in our life, is that connection and that oneness. And respect is based on all of this. And respect is a brilliant way of showing this. So I'll talk a little bit more about the bow in this passage from Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. I've actually read this once or twice before. It's a really wonderful part. Again, this is Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by Shunryu Suzuki, a wonderful book. And this chapter is entitled Bowing. He says, after Zazen, we bow to the floor 9 times. By bowing, we are giving up ourselves. To give up ourselves means to give up our dualistic ideas. So there's no difference between Zazen practice and bowing. Usually to bow means to pay our respects to something which is more worthy of respect than ourselves. But when you bow to Buddha, you should have no idea of Buddha. You just become one with Buddha. You are already Buddha himself. When you become one with Buddha, one with everything that exists, you find the true meaning of being. When you forget all your dualistic ideas, everything becomes your teacher, and everything can be the object of worship. So this is what I'm talking about. This is like the idea of, you are your Buddha nature bowing. You are already one with that nature. The bow is just a way to remind ourselves of that, or to show it. When everything exists within your big mind, that is your highest self, that which is beyond the ego and the little mind, all dualistic relationships drop away. There's no distinction between heaven and earth, man and woman, teacher and disciple. Sometimes a man bows to a woman, sometimes a woman bows to a man. Sometimes the disciple bows to the master, sometimes the master bows to the disciple. A master who cannot bow to his disciple cannot bow to Buddha. Sometimes the master and disciple bow together to Buddha. Sometimes we may bow to cats and dogs. In your big mind, everything has the same value. Everything is Buddha himself. You see something or hear a sound, and there you have everything just as it is. In your practice, you should accept everything as it is, giving to each thing the same respect given to a Buddha. Here there is Buddhahood. Then Buddha bows to Buddha, and you bow to yourself. This is the true bow. There's more to that. You guys should read it. It's wonderful. But when we are bowing, you should not be in class thinking like, I'm bowing and I'm doing it for this long. People ask me all the time, like, how long should the bows be, sir? I never answer the question because I don't want you sitting there and counting. All right, he said to count to 10. 1, 2, 3. Then you're not bowing. You're just counting, right? The bow is what you're doing physically and what you're doing mentally. And if you're actually able to let go of the ego, then it doesn't really matter how long you're bowing for, and that doesn't have anything to do with it, right? Of course, the longer bow denotes more respect. And, traditionally the bow to Sifu is longer and showing more respect, and the bow to the students is the second longest, and the bow to beginning or end of class is the shortest bow. But the bow itself should have the same kind of intentionality and the same kind of purpose and the same feeling behind it, no matter who or what you are bowing to. Because all things, as I just read, all things deserve our respect. And in fact, all things, are getting respect. All things are respect. They have that nature in them, whether we are aware of it or we are showing it or not. It's still there. It's still happening. As are we. And this is one of the trickiest parts. This was very hard for me, as I said on the blog and I said earlier this week. Accepting respect for me was difficult. When I was younger, I didn't think that I deserved any respect from anybody at all. I had a very low sense of my self-worth, and this whole idea of respect was all wrapped up in the idea of like, well, I have to be better than somebody else to get their respect. And if somebody's bowing to me, it means that they're showing me that respect, meaning that like, okay, well, I'm kind of above them in some way. And so when I started teaching classes here in Los Angeles for the first time as a Sifu, and I sat there, I said, Sifu ni right, and everybody bowed, and I just sat there upright. I was like, I don't like this at all. I don't like this feeling of everybody else is bowing to me. And I really felt like, why do I deserve this? Why, like, there's nothing special, there's nothing great about me. And as I would have those thoughts, I realized that's totally correct. There is nothing special about me, Ryan. Like, I'm just as terrible and wonderful as everybody else. And there is actually nothing special or unique about me as Sifu. The thing that's at play there that I recognized is, and this is how I got around having a hard time with people bowing to me and accepting respect, was I realized that you guys aren't bowing to me. You're bowing to more of like the channel or the idea of Sifu. You're bowing to my Sifu-ness, which is something that just came from time and practice. In fact, in order to be Sifu, I had to kind of stop being Ryan or transcend being that smaller version of myself. And it's not like every time I strap on this coat and walk out onto the mats in the dojo, I'm transcending my ego and I'm perfect and enlightened in every way. But there's at least more of that going on than there was before. And you guys might experience that too. When you put on your uniform and you bow into class, you are placing yourself in that mindset, and you're taking on that opportunity to connect with your highest self and to be very respectful of that and of the moment, and to receive respect. So if somebody is bowing to you in class, that might seem to you like, I don't know really what's going on here. I mean, I assume they're bowing to me because I'm bowing to them, and that's fine. But like, what if you finish the bow and the other person is still down there bowing, and you're like, well, that's weird. I should have bowed for longer. I messed up. I'm sure someone's going to get that phone at some point, right? I'm just going to go ahead and decline this. Thank you. So, when we accept respect, we have to recognize that it's not our ego that they're bowing to. It's not our small self. It is what is beyond that, at least if we're doing it correctly. The bowing and showing of respect, the bowing and receiving of respect is done by the highest self. It's done by the Buddha nature, or the divine in us. And that part of us is, of course, worthy of all the respect in the world. And that part of us can very easily accept that respect, because it only knows respect, it only knows love, and it only shows that to other people. So of course that's what it's going to get in return. So the practice of a bow is the practice of that, identifying with your highest self. And having somebody bow to you, if your mind goes to, I don't deserve this, what is this? You got to recognize that as an opportunity to let that go and remember who they're bowing to or what they're bowing to, and that is what you truly are, even if you don't feel like it in that moment. Right? Julie asked me a great question this morning in Tai Chi about this concept of how can showing respect, she asked, what is the way that I can show respect and then have that kind of show up in my heart? And the way that most people think of it is the other way around, right? I have to have respect in my heart, and then I will be able to show it. But that is kind of the same thing as, my spiel about motivation, or whatever it is that you decide that you're going to do when you are your highest self, and then you don't feel like doing it. Well, if you don't have motivation, and that stops you from doing the things that you know that you want to do, then you're stuck, right? So what we do in that case is we make the decision. We know what our highest self would do, and then we take motivation out of the equation. We just do it. And when we do that, when we take that action, that connects us back to our highest self. It's the same idea as when we smile, even though we don't feel happy or we don't feel like smiling. If you're able to pull off a genuine smile, and I don't mean this, like that smile that you get and you receive when you're walking down the street past a stranger and you go like, that creepy smile doesn't do anything for you. That makes you feel bad about yourself, and that makes the other person feel bad about themselves. But if it's a real smile and it's up there in the eyes, right? I got one of these smiles once from Tom McGraw, who was a Red Sash with Seafood Brown years ago, and I just was walking off the mats into the changing room, and he was like, "Hello, sir," and he gave me that smile, and it just made my year. It was like the nicest smile that I had ever gotten, and it made him happy, and it made me happy. And I'm getting off topic. If you take that same concept of I'm able to smile, and that brings that puts that emotion in my heart, that makes it real for me. We can play with that in the actions that we take, right? If I know what my highest self would do, and I'm able to show respect in the way that my highest self would, in that moment, if I bow, for example, with the intention of being utterly respectful and having it be my Buddha nature, the divinity in me bowing to the divinity in you, then that is what is there, present for me. So really, every time we bow, that's why you shouldn't be counting, because if you're counting, there's no room for the divinity in you, right? It's like when you're at a middle school dance at a Catholic school, you have to leave room for God in between you and the person you're dancing with. You've got to leave room for God in your consciousness. You got to leave room for your highest self by not having a busy mind and not being all concerned with those little things. So you bow and you just let all of that roll right off of you. And what's left in that moment is the perfect expression of your highest self in that moment, and there is nothing else to experience, and there's nothing else to do, and there's no higher place to go. So let's work on respect. As I said in the blog, like, a lot of people hear the word respect and they think of like, I gotta be a little bit afraid of this person. And of course I bow to my senior students, because if I don't, they might like hit me when we're sparring with each other. I had a great experience once when I first started practicing. I walked into a restaurant and I saw a senior student, and I'm not going to name him, but some of you know him, and he's a truly wonderful martial artist. But he was the same age as me, and I walked into this restaurant. I was 17 and he was 17, and I was like, "Oh, sir, you're a student at C. Brown School, right? At the School of it's the School of Chinese Martial Arts, which is what we used to call it." And he looked at me. He looks up from his date. And he looks up at me and he goes, "I teach at the School of Chinese Martial Arts," because he was a black coat and he would help out in classes sometimes. And I was taken aback by several things in this interaction, but I thought it was hilarious looking back on it. When we are truly humble and truly showing respect, that is our opportunity to not be fearful of anybody or anything, right? So of course you have to respect something that is more powerful and dangerous than you, because if you don't and you're not careful, something terrible will happen to you. But if we're bowing out of fear, or we're showing respect out of fear, that's not right. Your true highest self doesn't experience fear. It doesn't know what that is. Now, it might be smart enough to know not to mess with a tiger in the jungle, but it's not walking around totally in fear all the time, because that's not what your highest self does. Your highest self actually is totally fine with getting eaten by a lion or whatever happens, right? It's all good. We're all just one anyways. So, all that stuff that we add into respect and we add into bowing is all extra. It's all nonsense. It doesn't belong and it doesn't help. So let it go. And allow yourself in that bow to be just one with that moment. And that is the greatest sign of respect that we can show for ourselves, for our practice, for that moment, is to have nothing in the way. No complications. Nothing separating us from each other. So as we meditate, it's the same thing. I like to bow sometimes if I'm really trying to start a meditation off strong. I'll actually just do a bow to myself, to my highest self, and then I'll sit and I'll meditate. And if you're bowing to show reverence to something else, something greater than yourself, of course, that's in my definition the same idea as bowing to your highest self, which is one with whatever that is. But for you, whatever showing reverence to will do. Again, that's the same idea of taking yourself out of the small self and identifying with and connecting to something bigger than yourself. And meditation is that opportunity for us exactly. We sit and we let go of everything extra. We sit and we let go of fear. We let go of any winning idea, of any gaining idea, of anything that is judging, and all of that stuff. And that will allow us to fully experience respect for ourselves and respect for everything and everyone else. So let's do that now. Sit comfortably.